are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay, joined by John, Kellen, and TJ. And today we are also joined by a very special guest. He's worked on countless movies and television series, including Tales from the Dark Side, Mortal Kombat, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Blade, Leatherface, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Critters 2. I mean, Jesus Christ, we could take up a whole episode with just the things that you've worked on. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mick Strawn.
See, I was trying to fool you, and I guess it didn't work.
Buffer.
Even I could see me rocking back and forth. Hi guys, how's it going?
Good.
Good. Thanks for coming on to the show. Like I said before, we're just kind of a roundtable discussion about all things horror and what you've done with your career, which is just
Throwing it away.
But
God,
thank you so much.
Damn it.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us, taking some time with us. We're super excited to have you. And before we really deep dive into the episode, I just wanted to give you a second to talk about your book, which we had talked about earlier, Behind the Screams, The Dream Masters Revealed. You and Blake Best co-wrote this book where you share some untold stories about the making of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master.
I actually just
Tell us a little bit more.
I just sent you guys a clip. Now, do you have the technology to play it? Look around. Look in your emails. Because I don't know who I sent it to.
I think I can pull it up and do a screen share if we want to.
Well,
It should be up there.
it's a video. Yeah.
We'll get it on there for sure. But if you just want to take some time, tell us a little bit about your book, where people can get a copy and all that fun stuff.
Well, you can get you can pry a copy out of my cold dead hands. But actually I printed the book to hand out at cons to sell for ridiculous amounts of money. And it's a book about the making of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which was one of the most interesting experiences of my life, because it was done a very short period of time. It was done we started prep in February and it was in theaters in August of that year. Back then, that was just a stunningly short amount of time. So in order to achieve that, and it was a 60-page outline. I mean, none of it was finished, and the crew kind of just got together and made that film kind of around Rennie Harlan. And basically we took the concept of Rennie Harlan and we put him in the center of what we were doing. Then we made the film. It was such an interesting film in that we had to hire everybody in town, and then I had to go out and pull all these people together as the production designer. It was large for a nightmare at that time. I mean, and it's probably the biggest one that was ever done as far as how much scenery and how much building and how many effects, practical effects, and that were involved. I mean, we used virtually every effect. I mean, you had every makeup effect you could imagine. You had rear screen projection. You had every in-camera effect anybody's ever seen. We actually did it on that film, including force of perspective. I mean, all kinds of when we do the resurrection scene in the graveyard. I mean, there's one where the claw was actually made and painted. It was made out of essentially gunpowder, so that in reverse you saw it just flare out and then come up and form the glove. And basically what we did is we made a glove out of gunpowder and then caught it on fire, and then filmed it and then reversed it so that the glove all of a sudden appears there. I mean, just every kind of blood gag you can imagine, especially in the Forcer perspective. I mean, there were segments of it that you didn't see; they'd never been out. But we actually had a scene where the facade that I made of the Elm Street house, and that isn't the Elm Street house in 4. It's a facade, and we had to build the facade because the lighting effect that we were using doesn't allow you to have something behind it. In other words, think of it this way. Think of the Elm Street as being an enormous cucaloris, and a cucaloris is something that you put in front of a light in order to get a shape out of the light that comes out of it. So the shape of the light that we were using on that was a beam, shooting beams of light and throwing smoke in front of it, so that you could see these long, narrow beams shooting out. But the only way that you could get that back then was by using distance. So that you took an enormous light and then you would set it between 75 and 100 feet behind what it was you were shooting, and then you kept flagging it and flagging it and flagging it, so that you got it down to these narrow parameters, and those narrow parameters are what shoot out the beams. And so when you're looking at that house, there's several shots of it where you see these beams glowing at you. And that's only because it is just a facade standing in front of these great big lights. So we did have a sequence where we had 2 facades. We had that facade, and in front of it we had a facade of Kristen's house. And essentially what happens is she comes out of the house, and in one shot the camera comes up above her, and that house is her house. And when the camera comes up and gets up above her, we pull her house, which is on tracks. We pull the whole house aside, and then the camera would slam back down right in front of her, and there's the Elm Street house. She looks behind her and sees it and starts to run. And I gotta paint that corner up there. And as she's running right straight towards the camera. And we had set up across the street in front of the lot that we were using for the Nightmare on Elm Street facade. She then runs into the Nightmare on Elm Street hallway, and the door then slams right down behind her, which was an enormous build. I mean, basically we actually built the hallway across the street and into the neighbor's front yard. Wow. And that was never seen because nobody liked Tuesday night. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that's so impolite for me to say. Because Tuesday night sucked. That's what it was. That's what it was. Okay. None of you guys are going to tell Tuesday night that I said that, right?
I will keep it in this.
Just between us.
Definitely.
Pinky swear. Okay. Oh, is there something else embarrassing you want me to say?
Well, I'm sure we can get there. John, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, the big thing that I'm really curious about, I was reading about your career, and I know a lot of times people, especially in horror movies, have a background as a fan. When you were growing up, were you a Fangoria kid? Were you into Hammer horror? What was your kind of foray into wanting to get into that?
I gotta tell you, the thing is all films were equal to me, except for when I was growing up. My favorite film was Young Frankenstein.
Right one.
And to this day, people always ask me what my favorite horror film is, and my favorite horror film is Young Frankenstein. Has not changed. you know. And the thing is I grew up seeing all those. There was a time when there was nowhere to distribute any kind of film that you shot. You shot it once, and then and you released it and into a theater. And other than like second runs or stuff like that, that was the best you could do with that film. But then TV came along about the time that I came along. TV came along, and then you could start showing all of these Universal horror films and things like the swamp thing and the Invisible Man, you know, Frankenstein, Dracula, and all the versions of them. We saw at night, you know, 11 o'clock at night, and I had a full appreciation for those. But the main thing was that I wanted my family to eat.
Understood. So were you like an art? Were you into art, things like that growing up? Was that something you kind of had my mother was an artist, and my father was a builder, and I guess those two things together made design a really easy thing for me. My sister was back east, working off Broadway, selling purses on the corner in New York, selling, you know, bad knockoff purses so that she could go work at night, work at wardrobe in these places that were bars that were, you know, like had theaters in them, you know, which is like, you know, 7 people sitting in front of a stage. And one of those directors that did those little tiny plays got a great job in LA, and I was doing something in construction in San Bernardino, and in about 81, I think, she came out, and the important thing is he was given $5 million to do a safety film, to do a safety commercial for the Canadian Safety Board,
Wow.
amputees and safety boards. Now, remember that's an important part of the story. So then the first thing that you do when you get a job like that, and if you're a director, is you hire somebody who will not reveal how little experience you actually have. So he naturally hired my sister. And then my sister, of course, has to do exactly the same thing. So then she hired me.
Wow.
Awesome.
So I didn't know what the hell I was doing at all, and I was running a huge painting crew, and I painted this robot that was called Asta.
Mhm.
And Astar, she fell through all these tubes, these great big tubes that we built. And she fell through the tubes, and John Dykstra was doing the miniatures and effects on this, you know. So it was weird. He taught me how to make models and how to paint with metallics and stuff like that. It was the best education you could imagine. And I was just dumped into the deep end, as it were. And the funny thing is I mentioned this on a podcast about 3-4 years ago. And I mentioned this, and they go, Astar, you mean the Play Safe commercials? I go, yeah, you know, Play Safe. It says this robot that has her arm gets cut off in one of these tunnels, and she presents says, I can put my arm back on. Click. But you can't, so play safe, right? And I swear it was a Canadian podcast. They go, oh my God, do you realize that commercial has been on in the afternoon 3 times every afternoon for 45 years?
Wow.
Wow.
That's some.
I was like, what?
Timeless.
So I guess I'm old and yet timeless.
There you go.
Who knew?
So one thing I'm really fascinated about, kind of jumping around a bit, is I know you worked on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. That is always, to me, been a very like underrated movie, because it's kind of, you know, it's in between the wackiness of 2,
and the utter here, let's somebody get the camera out of the trunk and and wipe it off and wipe the lens off with your sleeve. Yeah, that's and then so then I did 3, and I had also worked with what's his name, the guy that directed
Jeff Burr.
no directed 1, directed
Toby
Toby.
Hooper.
Toby.
Yeah.
I worked with Toby, and ooh, that was rough.
Wow. That's awesome though. So what did you work with Toby on?
He did a version of the Nightmare on Elm Street story on the TV series.
These nightmares. That's right.
That was like the pilot episode, right?
It was the pilot episode. Yeah. And I designed all those. But the weird thing about it was working with Toby at that point. It was let me give you an imitation. I'll give you my best Toby imitation when we were at the meeting. I had to have a meeting, and the thing is, I had no time for anything on that show. They would all come in on a Friday, and they would say things that the directors and director would come in and say, what he needed, and then like literally on Monday we were shooting, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we would shoot for 4 days, and then on the 5th day we'd have meetings, and we just did the cycle again and again and again and again. And but talking to Toby was a strange experience, because I sat down in the room. Toby's sitting in the room, and I walk in, and I'm sitting there, and it's like, okay, so what do we need to do? He's like, well, I'll tell you, here's the thing. If you could, because we need to pull together the sense of like, and the weather, and then and lots of and dust, and if we could pull the thing with the 20 fucking minutes.
Wow.
What was he smoking?
I have no idea. Yeah, and he looked as gray as his beard at the time, man. I'm just sitting there going, and then when he stopped talking, I just got up and went back to my office.
Wow.
20 fucking minutes. I'm never getting those 20 minutes back.
Man.
I've just marked them. I just marked them Toby Hooper, and walked away, and did my job. And he never said it was bad. He never said it was good. I hated that show. I mean, we got to do some okay stuff from the point of view of like being absolutely broke and doing wacky shit that you could come up with at 3:00 in the morning. Beans says you were always fucking there.
Oh wow. So it's one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can say that if it's a weekend, right? It went 8.5 fucking months.
Oh
Wow.
man.
Yeah, I mean, what? When Thanksgiving came around, I'd been on that show for 7 months. And Thanksgiving came around, we were all having it out at my house in Calabasas, and my wife sent me to the store to go get eggs, and like I spent 2 hours like looking around the store, looking at things, going, well, that's not an egg. That's not an egg.
Just exhausted.
I was just so tired. I was completely out of my mind. I mean, I remember one time I was driving home, and the windshield wiper, and it started to rain, which it does like 3 times a year in LA, and it started to rain in my I had bad windshield wipers, and smeared the windshield, and I just broke into tears.
Wow.
I get home, and my wife was, what the hell's wrong with you? I don't get to the car. What the fuck? And it smeared. I couldn't say anything. And
Yeah, wow. Yeah, there are so many things I could ask with that. I know, TJ, you've got a lot of I imagine you got a lot of nightmare questions, right?
I do, but the thing that I really would be remiss if I didn't ask you about before we jump into more of that is I got to know more about the Roger Corman shelved project that kind of leaked out. I bought this thing as a bootleg DVD, the Fantastic Four, the 1994 version.
You know, I the director Ole Sassoon of that, you know, he keeps bemoaning the fact that it didn't get a release, right? You know, and he never got his due. And I keep going, look, Ole, Jesus Christ, do you realize that if that had actually been released, nobody would have fucking seen it in the world, right? You know that, right?
Well, it might have been better than the ones we have.
Honestly,
Well,
yes.
yeah,
Honestly,
honestly,
It is better.
yeah, it is. It is.
Like, I love
Well,
Corman.
you know what? You know what I'll tell you what I'm going to stand by. Absolutely, I had no money to do sets. I mean, like no money to do sets. That's not the way that Roger Corman doesn't pay people money. So anyway, it's when I got done with that, I literally had, I was not a comic book guy, right? And there was no way that cartoon things looked out there. I mean, really, I mean, you know, that didn't come until later, you know, and I still say to you that that the comic books that I did my stab at comic book art with the sets and wardrobe and stuff. And I think that we still did for absolutely no money. We did a pretty good job, and that in that at least we made it look like a comic book.
Yeah, I think it looks more like the comic book than the big $100 million
Doesn't it?
budget
Doesn't
ones.
I mean, and you have to understand, I didn't have any kind of like a roadmap to how this stuff was supposed to look. All I had was these freaking comics, you know, which people would show me the comics we were working with. We had like a geek on board. Is that what they're called? Geeks?
They're nerds now. They were geeks in '94. Now they're nerds. They
Okay.
got promoted.
Okay. And the thing is every time I wanted to see something, they would remove it from the envelope, right? And then they would set it down.
Oh, it was limited edition. It had to be in the plastic.
All of them. Yeah, I was like, fuck, you people are out of your fucking minds. You know that, right?
But I think the character of the Thing looks like identical to the comic book, better than any other interpretation.
Optic nerve. And the funny thing about it is Optic Nerve is still around, the same company. And back then, you know, it was basically like two guys, I think, in a garage. And I thought that they did a great job. You know, it's funny because I talked to Optic Nerve today, and it's absolutely nobody from when it first started, right? You know, it's like Optic Nerve, you know, 7.8 or something like that. And I talked to him and go, yeah, no, I worked with you guys back in the beginning. And they go, beginning of what? Beginning of what? And you go, no, never mind. It's okay. Never mind. That's what it's like to get old, people.
Yeah.
And we're getting there.
Don't let this happen to you.
So I'm very curious. Has this been released yet? It said it was a TV special for 2021.
What?
I don't know if it's Merry Effing Christmas or Merry Fucking Christmas.
Yeah, it was a radio play, and I played Bad Santa. I played evil.
Yeah, I saw you as Santa.
Evil fucking Santa. I mean, I don't know where they got that idea from, but I thought I was a pretty good Santa, you know, if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into radio plays. Right?
Yeah, very fascinating.
I think that my favorite one, ho ho motherfucking ho, goddammit.
Do you do Christmas parties?
Post-COVID Santa.
That is post-COVID Santa.
That's awesome.
I trim my big beard back in, a little bit. Just trying to get. I did around. I had a really great, Santa beer around Christmas, but no, I have not gone so far as to have little kids sit on my lap because
I think me
Chris
and Jay.
Hansen's always watching.
I think me and Jay accidentally have. We
Yeah,
worked at
there you go.
Walmart back.
No, we were at Santa's at Walmart. It was awful.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Worst Santas ever.
Yeah.
I do have a technical question before we get into some more of like some of your work in the kind of late 80s, early 90s. What exactly is, in your words, the differentiation between an art director and a production designer?
Production. You know what? An art director can be a production designer, as in Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Yeah.
But usually, I mean, technically, or who gets the title? I mean, that's the real thing with it. It is on Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I was more involved in just the sets. My sister, I got the job, and I brought my sister on to deal with the set dressing, and I dealt with the sets and all of the interactions between special effects. But I was originally working with Peter Chesney, who was the mechanical effects on Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and I developed all this the device that goes up and breaks the wall out that looks like the snake.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of the rigging of the arms coming out of the TV and that sort of stuff, because I ran his shop at that point.
That's my favorite effect of any of the old school Freddy movies is the TV.
Oh, the
Welcome
TV?
to prime time. Yeah.
Awesome.
I like that. As far as the sequence goes, I love the snake sequence. I mean, the whole sequences, and it involves a lot of people. And I'll tell you something that you don't know about it.
Okay.
Peter and I, at the end of the show, Peter and I were hanging around his shop, and they sent a PA over from the editing bay that said that they had a problem, that they were having problems cutting the mechanical part of the snake coming across the floor and up the walls, that they were having problems at the beginning of it because there was so much kinetic energy used underneath the floor that the floor just kind of exploded. It just started flapping up, and it kind of went random. It didn't come up in a line like you can see going up the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to know if we could think of a shot that we could put together that would work for that. And Peter and I got to thinking about it, and we went out and Peter went inside and tied a rope to a Clorox bottle. I went across the street and got a $12. I specifically remember it was $12. I got a used Oriental carpet, and we slapped it down. He had an old Mitchell 35, and we got down on the edge of the carpet to look across it. We threw a bunch of crap on it, and then we pulled the Clorox bottle straight towards the camera underneath the carpet. And if you look at the show, the very first shot that you see of the creature on the floor is actually a Clorox bottle. And now that I've told you that, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, oh, fuck, that is definitely a Clorox bottle.
That's all we'll see
Wow.
from here on out.
I gotta see that.
I'm going to watch it back. I've seen that dozens of times.
Yeah, you didn't see the Clorox bottle, did you?
I did not.
Then notice it.
Now,
Yes.
I assume there was a lot of like, what do you call it? Like,
Clorox bottles?
it's escaping me. Like they do in claymation, stop motion animation used in that sequence, right? With the snake.
There is actually, they did most of it. There's a couple of shots. I think that there's one shot that's just free of the snake in stop motion, but I think that they actually used the snake itself because it was only like a few frames. So they actually manipulated the snake.
Okay, so you did have a
on the
whole
set.
big practical snake then for the whole thing.
Oh God, yeah.
How
Oh,
big
God.
was it? How big was it?
Well, the snake itself was about 9 feet long.
Okay.
Wow.
But
There's a really big head, though, right?
yeah. But there were several. Okay. I have done a lot of shows where I explain per shot, how we did it, and it's such a complicated that sequence is infinitely complicated. But most of it is actually like, I'll give you an example. We had the skin of the snake that was actually originally done in Freddy colors, but then the day that we were supposed to start shooting it, the executive showed up on set and they said, has anybody noticed that the snake looks like an enormous dick? and I am not kidding, because they turned to me and I went, well, yeah, hello, you wanted it to look like Freddy's skin. That's what we asked. And we said things like, that's pretty phallic. Did you know what the phrase phallic meant?
Apparently not.
Now that is a case of trying to clean up your language too much, right? Because I think that we did send a memo and we did use the word phallic. And I think that it took them to actually come to the stage to like do the math to say, well, phallic is this. Oh, phallic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Huge dick.
And
Right.
it's a huge dick. It's a huge dick. It's a huge dick. And so
Phallic Kruger.
And so we were desperately using everything we could to paint it green. And now we had an enormous green dick on there. But I give you an example. Just
Gangrene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mostly, this is a funny thing, is mostly in it. It's a skin that she's wearing, that Kristen is wearing, right? Because I give you an example. When she's down on the floor and she's being eaten by the snake.
Yeah.
Well, she's just struggling. What she's really doing is we wrapped her in the skin of the snake and then we pulled the skin off.
Oh, you did the reverse shot.
Yeah, I mean, but how else would you do it? I mean, it's like so it's basically
Okay.
but then we took the whole set and we put it up on an 8-foot platform, and we got a camera crane and we mounted a stunt person up on top of the camera crane. And you notice that she's turned away from, when she goes up in the air, but she goes up in the air, and basically we used the snake head to cover the head of the camera crane. When it comes up and she falls back down. So literally most of the time she's wearing the snake, except for the one instance where we were puppeting the snake. And basically that was, just done with brooms and shit from underneath, because we were 8 foot high at that time.
Yeah. Orson Welles actually did a lot of that similar build-up stage work and Citizen Kane.
He wasn't there, but
yeah,
but
I wouldn't assume so.
But the face was based on Orson Welles. I mean,
I could see that.
Oh man, did you have any? Did you have any?
Wait. What does the "oh man" thing mean? Huh? Am I not being truthful enough?
I believe it.
I definitely believe it.
It's true. It's all true. It's just weird.
I did wonder, do you have any interesting, I'm sure you do, Bob Shea stories, as far as him just being, everyone seems like Bob has got that story about Bob Shea, and I know you probably worked with him a lot with those films.
Well, we did Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Bob, we had this bowling alley party, right? The cast and crew party was actually held at a bowling alley.
Wow.
And during it, my wife came down to the party, which is, I mean, my wife does not have anything to do with the film business. She hates the film business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somehow or other, and for reasons I will never know, I talked her into coming out to that party. And she Bob came up and said, it shakes my head, and he goes, you and by the way, Bob Shea and I went back and forth on this film, like literally. There was a period where we were getting towards the end, and he kept going, well, Strawn, your money's all run out. And I'd say, okay, I'll fire everybody. And he'd laugh. And the next day, nobody'd show up.
Yeah.
And I said, and I just walked out alone. And he said, what the fuck are you doing? him and the first AD were stomping up to me going, what the fuck are you doing? I said, well, you said you were out of money. what we were going to negotiate. I go, well, yeah. This is the negotiation.
There you go.
So we had a few of those. But the thing is I never got a chance to get away from the set, and basically I just left home for about 5 months. And when I came back, I told my wife to come down to and probably had I thought this out, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I talked her into going down to this to the cast and crew party, and she nailed Bob Shea in the corner and said, God damn it, people have to work 24 fucking hours a goddamn day. There was one day where you didn't come home for 9 days straight in a row, and blah, 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 blah. And Bob was over in the corner like this, and I had to go rescue him.
Wow, it's interesting stuff.
So we've had a long and varied career, the two of us together.
Yeah. Did you get to meet Wes Craven at all? I know he was involved a lot on the front end of the production, and for a while he was toying with directing it, and then handed off some of the stuff after he got.
Yeah, we were involved in the very beginning. In the very beginning, we had meetings where we had to sit down and we had to divide. Bob Shea's challenge in this is he says, "Look, I want this to be. I don't want the same returns on the third movie as the normal." See, the way that it used to be back then is you'd put all your money, you'd put some money into a low budget film, and then the second one, it would be relatively successful. And the second one, you put, like half as much money in, and then on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And his thing was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're going to put $3 million into this one. So we were like, yeah, okay. Let me say, he put a lot more than that into it. So anyway, in the end, so when we're at the party, he comes over and he says, I for the fact that you're not being very fiscally responsible, you came up with a good film. You came up with a good look. And my wife just went after him, boy, just like,
Oh man, I can only imagine.
It took me a while to catch up because she had him by his shirt right there.
Oh wow.
But the thing is Wes Craven and me and all the guilty parties were sitting at a table, and we spent a lot of time in the beginning trying to work out how we were going to make this as good a film as possible. That he was going to put a little bit more money into it. We were going to think things through, and so Craven's thing, his big deal was his main problem is the problem that you always have in a horror film is that you've already ruined the waters. You know what I'm saying? Is where do you go when you have a concept like we're going to get you in a dream? He had what's called the Superman problem, right?
Yeah.
And we all know what the Superman problem is come on, Superman could solve all of his fucking problems. So
that's why they had to make kryptonite.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's the Superman problem is that Superman doesn't have any problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this problem was, eventually Freddy just has to wait until you go to sleep, and then he wins, right?
Yeah.
So what he does is he makes the girl can bring people into the dreams, which has been a huge thing for the whole rest of the series, right?
Yeah.
From 2 on, it's always that mixing of bringing people in from the dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was his big contribution to it. The next big contribution was that they were going to let Robert Englund off the chain, because what they had is they had this incredible actor that they weren't taking much advantage of, other than putting, basically a rubber mask over him. Which, by the way, that's not what that mask is. That's
hours of makeup, right?
That's hours of
What?
makeup. And it is the most complicated and incredibly well done makeup prosthetic. That's the most natural thing that's ever been done.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays everybody tries to do it with silicone, and it's like, dudes.
No.
Yeah, I think they started doing that on New Nightmare in '94, and then on the Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah,
more of that.
you see, the thing is, back then they used whipped latex, and it was incredibly finicky, and it took a long time to do. And each time to do a mold, it's like they would fail at a rate of like 3 to 1, something
Wow.
like that. And but the whipped latex was like just super movable. And anyway, the thing is the first element was Craven's story. The second element was letting Robert off the chain, and Robert then started to like kind of do his own bits and kind of like spur the moment stuff, and he got a chance to be funny and sarcastic. And Robert is one of the smartest people in the world. He really is.
Yeah, how much of the dark comedy of Freddy and the two films that you worked on was just Robert ad-libbing versus how much of it was in the script?
It was Robert. Yeah, no, most of it's Robert. Even if it was in the script, they might as well just said joke here and let and let him come up with it, because he's the one. He's a brilliant.
Yeah, really smart
person.
too. Yeah.
Really smart. Yeah, I mean, just and such a great actor. I introduced him to his wife. His wife worked for me. His wife worked for me on and I introduced them on a film called Frankenstein: The College Years.
Oh wow!
Wow.
What year was that?
Let's see.
I saw that on your filmography.
Hey, we've all got an art film hidden somewhere in our resume.
Hey, I'm a fan. I've actually seen that.
God, have you?
Oh,
my
yeah,
God.
I've seen it. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Somebody brought that up the other day, and they'd seen it like 8 times. And I was like, oh my God, you're asking me questions about things I even vaguely remember the name of the film.
Well, you're just trying to remake Young Frankenstein, right?
Yeah, I think actually it's what they did. It was the same. I mean, the arc of the monster was Young Frankenstein all the way.
Very cool.
So anyway, the thing is then I got to bring my thing to the table, and I said, here's my thing. I'm going to stop trying to do these on location. I'm going to pull it all into the stages, and they've been on stages ever since.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Because the first 2 were like 95% on location, and then our film turned around being 80% on stage. So
Awesome. Well, I got 2 more. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go.
I got 2 more films I want to ask you about, and then I'm going to hand it off to Kellen for a couple questions. But one of my absolute favorite films of the early 90s, and I think a very underrated franchise horror boogeyman, is Candyman. Tell me about how you got involved in the production of Candyman and what that was like.
You'll understand why I'm laughing. I was called downtown to a producer's office, and he was on the old S&A stages. And, they rent offices and stages, at the same time. And I go in and I meet him, and I said, well, what do you need? And he goes, well, we're doing this film called Candyman, and we just started filming on the stages here, and art department is kind of like not getting it together, and we need somebody to come in and act as a sort of a runner. It's just, he says, you know what, if you want to take over the whole show, you can do it. All you have to do is just keep this thing going down the road. Said, okay. Sounded like it was as ambiguous a job title. It was the weirdest meeting And so we agreed on a price, you know, and then I was going to come back the next day. And then I walked outside and I thought to myself, well, let's go see what's going on. And so I went down and noticed that they were filming right in the stage, right next to his offices. Right. And so I go over that stage and I walk onto the, you know, the light was on, but you can always walk in if you just kind of crack the door and walk in. And then you have to stand there and you have to wait until your eyes get used to the dark, because you just came out of the California sun. And there's this, this is where I'm standing. I'm standing right at the confluence of two sets, and one of them, the back of the set is just one wall going back off this way, no windows, and so I just see nothing but a row of flats this way. And then over to my left, I know that there's the craft services table. All of a sudden, a guy comes running like an old guy, running like old guys do, you know, like I do these days. Comes running and he's wearing jodhpurs, you know, sort of like that was the back in the 40s and the 50s, that indicated that you were a DP. but he comes around the corner and he goes over and he grabs a pot of coffee, whole pot, and he takes it and he runs back around the stage again, the set again. I go, wonder what that's all about. So I just kind of followed him, moseyed on around. And as I come around the edge of the set, it seems like everybody that's in the building, because there was nobody anywhere else, everybody is behind the camera looking back to my left. And I come all the way around the set, and there's that guy with the jodhpurs, and a woman like of a certain age, like, you know, 50 or something like that. And she's got the decaf and he's got the, you know, the regular coffee, and they're trying to splash it on each other in the middle of the set in front of the camera. And I was like, well, look at that. And they were doing all that classic, I don't know if you've ever tried to throw coffee out of one of those pitchers, but it doesn't work, because what happens is, as soon as the coffee gets out of balance, the pitcher pitches back like this, and you wind up pouring it all onto yourself, which is essentially they were just soaking themselves trying to splash coffee on each other. And I walk out and I walk into the producer's office and I said, is he in there? And she's like, no, he's not. And I go, yeah, right. Yeah, he is. And I go, I open the door and I sit down in front of him and I go, okay, I just went out on set, and this producer just deflated like he was one of those, you know, floppy balloons, and you turn the fan off. He just went, just flopped down on his desk. I go, so what the fuck was that all about? And so eventually it turns out that both of these people were what I call the rehab junkies, you know, and the DP is very famous. I mean, he did The Man Who Fell from Earth.
Oh wow!
Back in the day, right? You know,
David Bowie.
Yeah, the David Bowie film, right? You know, this is, and he'd probably been doing drugs ever since. And,
I'm sure.
and it's really funny because he had what I call, you know, angry drug face, which is this kind of thing. You know, just rubbing his face all the time, right? You know, and I gotta tell you something. That's like a 5-8 ball a day habit right there. and so finally the producer says, yeah, no, they want to kill each other. They want to kill each other, and contractually I need both of them to finish the show out. And I go, wait, you're kidding me, right? And he goes, yeah. I said, you can't fire either one of them? He says, no, it'd be a disaster. And I go, okay, well, okay. I said, you double my pay. And I don't give a fuck what you call me. I think I got the title of being like
Your credit is art department supervisor.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, supervisor. So let me tell you what an art department supervisor does. He sits in a chair right next to the fucking camera and makes sure that those two don't fight, don't go. And I swear to God, she would come for him. She would come for him like 5 times a day. And I'd have to get in there and just physically get in between them. And dude, it's like all I did was talk to people and get in between the two of them. That was it.
What was their actual jobs?
Production designer and director of photography. So these were the big swinging balls of the film, right? You know, and my job was to make sure that the two of them both made it to the end of the film in one piece.
Wow.
It was great. It was the best job I ever had. I mean, I literally didn't do shit for like 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I got paid a huge amount of money to do it. And every once in a while I got to play basketball Mick, which I was, you know, I was just like, I would dance in between them, you know. I like, dude, I could embarrass myself in every way you could possibly imagine. You know, just to, I would tell them to fuck off. And then what I would do is I would try and get one of them so pissed off at me that they go to complain to Alan, who was the producer, which then separated the two of them. And I did my job.
Wow.
Oh, it was a blast. It really
That's
was
awesome.
a lot of fun. So I mean, I designed a couple of things. I mean, I designed a jail cell or two and like a police station and did some of the set painting, but basically it was, you know, I mean, we had things on stage that I finished because I kind of acted as an art director when we weren't actually filming. But the rest of the time it was just to, you know, make sure that those two didn't kill each other.
That's awesome. I'm so glad I asked about Candyman.
It's a weird thing, and the thing is it has nothing to do with the credit. I mean, to tell you the truth, IMDb has no idea what us old farts really actually did. I mean, I was the second art director on Sid and Nancy.
Oh, really?
Wow, really?
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And they screwed it up because it was a production company out of Britain, and basically they left the set alone on a stage and froze it. And being as they froze the set, and Alex Cox had taken off with the sound reels because he didn't know if he liked the way the last shot went.
Wow.
So basically there was a standoff for a week. And so the crew was in America for a week in Hollywood, but we weren't maintaining the set. We weren't doing anything. We were just frozen out of it. We couldn't wrap it. We couldn't do anything. And so when we did wrap it, we were already on another show. And so literally I had a guy, the guy who ran the wrapping of the show got the job as the construction coordinator on it.
Wow.
It's like, okay, well, you know,
why not?
Whatever, you know, it's not that I feel like I need to correct all this shit. I got enough credits as it is.
That's awesome. Well, that was the movie that put Gary Oldman, one of the best character actors who
Gary
ever lived,
Oldman,
on the map.
I have to tell you something. Gary Oldman, the scene of Gary Oldman coming down the stairs, you know, singing My Way. Have you seen the film?
Yes, several times.
Okay, so he's like this completely wasted Sid Vicious, and he's coming. Oh, I did it more
from the Sex Pistols.
From the Sex Pistols, and he would come. His shot was he would get to the bottom of the staircase, and then the director Alex Cox would say cut, and he go, so what do you guys think of that? Was that good enough? You know, and it's like everybody is like literally dealing with whiplash, right? You know, everybody else is just you know, that guy was so good. I mean, he was, and the thing is I mean, I really appreciate people who aren't method actors, and Gary Oldman is not a method actor. He puts those faces on, and then just as soon as it says cut, he's the nicest guy in the world. Just
he's not Daniel Day-Lewis living out in the cabin for a year.
God, you know what? you can tell you're in deep shit when you come onto a set and the bad guy comes up and he actually smells.
Ugh,
Then you go, oh fuck, you're a method, aren't you? Oh, god damn it.
I don't know.
Fucking you know what? The rest of it, you know what? I don't walk around all day going, so should we move this over there or there? I don't go down the street going, should I park my car over here? Would it look right next to that green car next to it? I just don't know. Right? Fucking be a professional.
Yeah.
Take a shower.
So my last question before.
Take two, they're small. What do you want?
So another one of my favorite films from 1992. I actually liked the film much better than the show. Was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and you're credited on IMDb, which may or may not be true, as
It's
a
not
prop
true.
maker.
Well, I did do some props for it. I did props, and I did some of the rigging out in the courtyard. Some of the rigging for flying out in the courtyard and stuff.
Mhm.
But I was slated to production design it with Joss, and we both got fired at the beginning of the film.
Oh yeah, because he created the character.
Yeah,
wrote
he created the
script.
character, and he was going to direct that. And we prepped it for about 3 weeks.
Oh,
and
wow.
and then there was an argument up above us somewhere, and I got fired. So
Wow.
well, he got fired too, so I can't feel that bad about it. Actually, I've never felt bad being fired. Who cares?
Yeah. Always another. Well, your skills are in high demand, right?
Yeah,
All the time.
Usually by the time I get fired, neither one of us likes each other. So
There you go. Well, I'm gonna hand off to Kellen. I know he has a few questions for you in the barrels.
Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah.
hold on. Somebody try and pull up that little film and let's watch it together as a group.
John,
Come
you got
on.
that?
You guys got six minutes to kill.
Yeah. Should I do it or do you want to do it, John?
You know what? Do you want me to sign it? Because I will. John, God damn it, go get the film.
Yeah, TJ, if you wanna
It's
try to share it, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay. Let me pull
Okay,
it up for my.
should be
Yeah,
able to
don't
share
look
on the
at it.
screen.
Yeah, I can. I think I can do it.
What was the video?
About
You
the
set it
truck.
up.
Oh, this is a little video about trying to figure out how to finalize the sequence in Nightmare on Elm Street 4.
Can you send it to me one more time, John?
Oh.
It's showing up on my phone, but not on my computer for some reason.
Yeah, let me forward it to you again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I emailed it and sent it 7 different ways to God.
There you go. While we're waiting on that, I did want to ask. There was
Sure.
there was a question, and it's kind of random, but I saw it on your IMDb. You worked on a Canon Films movie, Breaking 2.
I did a couple of them. Yeah.
Okay, so what I am just fascinated with Canon Films and the whole
Really?
story. What were they like?
Okay. I have the best story to totally explain Canon Films, right? So just recently, I was working on setting up a film called Fear
Mhm.
with a company that's working out of Georgia.
Mhm.
And it was my first time out there, and they were going to go on a location scout. So I went and I met all these people at a restaurant, and there was a production designer there that I had worked with before. That it was kind of a handoff from him to me because he was going to go somewhere else and I was going to take it over. And I guess they had been talking about working for Canon Films because he did Runaway Train.
Mhm.
And I came down and they said, well, what is the weirdest thing about working for Canon Films? Because we know you did a couple of films with Canon. I said, the weirdest thing about working with Canon Films was that everybody in town hated them so much that they had to do everything with cash. And so when you would walk into the office and you were a department head, they would have a paper bag for you and it would have $10,000 in cash. And and the funny thing is, I said that, and everybody at the table starts cracking up and saying that, yeah, the production designer that's right here, and I wish I could remember his name. He just told us the same story. So that's what Canon Films was like. Canon Films was like running and gunning, you know. It was like
Nice.
super low budget, and at the same time, those two were very they were very involved. I remember we were working, we were doing the spinning room, and the spinning room had just been used. We were moving onto the set, onto the same stage that it was already sitting, having been used in Nightmare on Elm Street. And so we took the room out of the circular cage and built the garage from Breaking 2. And because he dances on the ceiling in that, right? So we had to film it in the same way, in the same place, and all the rest of that. And the two those two, Menachem go on, and I can't think of the other guy's name. They're super obnoxious. They had just gotten done. We were complaining that, you know, that we were all on a flat and that we had been working like for 20 hours straight. And he stood up and explained to us how there were 24 hours in a day, and we had signed up for the day. Right. So,
wow.
Anyway, yeah. Ultimate dick move. Right. And so, I snuck up behind the two of them and with a couple of hardware clips tied to a very short piece of rope and clipped it onto the bottom of their pants. and then I went and I got them both a cup of coffee, which didn't have any coffee on it, but I tripped just as I get up to the table so the cups would fall, and the two of them tried to jump away from the table, but they were clipped to each other.
Oh man.
Wow.
Man, it was such a great thing to see. So I can say this, that, you know, one of my great interactions with those two dipshits was to see the two of them try and scramble around on the floor, tripping each other constantly, trying to stand back the fuck up after I, you know, fake spilled a cup of coffee on them.
Can't even imagine. Gosh.
I remember one time the key grip that was, Alan also broke, Alan Goodenough. He was working down below, and I had sent somebody up to see how close the clearance was on something as the revolving room comes around. And Alan had to move it, and he had to stand there, and he had to tell his guys to move it, right? And so I'm sending a guy up all the way up into the perms, and he's up there, and he's trying to measure it, and he drops the tape just as he gets his hand out there to start to measure the distance between the highest point and the grid, right? He drops the tape, and it falls like 45 feet and hits Alan right here on the shoulder. And Alan didn't even miss a beat. It just goes boom. And I'm looking right at him because I'm talking to him, and he goes boom, bounces off. And he just slowly looks up and he goes, I know you got to come down sometime. And I couldn't get that motherfucker out of the grid for the rest of the day until I could guarantee that Alan had left.
All right, so I think we have the video ready, but Kellen, you want to ask your question real quick, and then we'll just finish out with the video.
Yeah, so I'm not as big of a movie historian as the rest of the guys in the group. I'm more of a cinephile. I just enjoy movies, and with that, the process.
You can get something for that. You know that, right?
Prescriptions are too high. But
prescription drugs these days.
So less about the individual movies, more about, you know, your process. What's your process from taking an idea that you're given and making it reality? And then how much creative control did you have in bringing other people's imaginations to life with your set designs?
The funny thing about it is you play I always used to play a percentage game. It was like 5% inspiration, and I would come up with, these are, the typical designer's board, and it, for me, it would include the way the effects went, and props and wardrobe and lighting. And the thing is if they didn't do it, I'd find another way to do it. And I was not above lying and cheating and screaming and yelling and usually I would just get it done because I'd stay up later than they would.
Perfect. So kind of with that, with your career, so movies back in the day, most everything was practical, though there wasn't computer effects. I watched recently the 1983 HBO feature presentation intro, which was all practical effects. They built the model sets, the camera tracking, the backdrop, everything was done by hand, and they had to storyboard it out and work everything together and do it all in one shot. And there's a certain charm to that. So my question is there's a certain charm and interactivity that comes with real effects.
Oh yeah,
whether
absolutely.
it's makeup, prosthetics, or set design. Do you feel CGI has diminished the feel and realism that practical effects provided to movies?
Here's the problem. The problem is that CGI can be used for everything, and it shouldn't be. It should be the thing that you work towards, a single shot that's very wide, and then you should go back in and use it as enhancement. It can also be used, when your practical effects just don't work. Here's the thing: practical effects didn't always work. I mean, right. And obviously, a lot of times, there's a certain amount of time they didn't work the way that you wanted, and it didn't look right. And it's just nice to have CGI there as another tool in the box. The problem is the producers used it to cut down on the shooting days, and then they would also realize a great deal more control over the actual film at the end, because they could rebuild themselves into the scenes. They could do all kinds of things to change the story. I mean, literally in 1983, one of the best jokes that you could use was, "Hey, don't worry about that. We'll fix it in post."
Right.
Yeah, when you see movies nowadays and everything's a big room with everything's covered in green, and they use basically blocks to simulate things, I feel like while the practical effects had their limitations, there was a certain charm to them. It made it feel like they were more present than they are now.
Ask the actors about that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure it's a challenge.
They hate that shit. But the thing is this: I think that in the normal run of things, unless your concept is so high that everything that you've got is, the design of it is so complex that everything needs to be built in a computer. Unless you're doing something like that, it should take its place as a tool in your toolbox and shouldn't become your toolbox.
I agree.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we got the video ready.
Let's try it.
Yeah, we're gonna try it.
So the story about the truck.
The story about the truck.
I'd love to hear the story.
You want to hear the story about that guy?
I would love to hear it.
Okay. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, we were having a lot of trouble with a script that was not finished. And not only was it not finished, we were in the middle of a writer's strike. So we couldn't have any of the people that wrote it go in and fix it. So basically, we built the film gag by gag. And we would sit down and certain gags just kind of like got worked out. And I'll tell you one that really got worked from scratch. It was the loop. Remember the loop?
Yes.
We're in a dream loop,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And we keep going around and around and around. Okay, here was the question. How do we get out of the loop? Remember the loop?
Yes.
The oh, we're in a dream loop,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And we keep going around and around and around. Okay, here was the question: how do we get out of the loop? Remember the loop?
Yes.
The oh, we're in a dream loop,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And we keep going around and around and around. Okay, here was the question: how do we get out of the loop?
Right.
Okay, and we had a couple of meetings about how to get out of the loop, and finally we really had to just plain film something. It was getting desperate.
Come on, man. Let's do this already.
And we had already filmed. We had them in the truck. We had them in the truck going down the road, right? We'd already done the loop 3 times. And we couldn't continue doing the loop.
The Holy Trinity, right?
Yeah, that's right. But we couldn't get out of it. So we're in Peter Chesney's shop. And we were in there with all the guilty parties. Bob Shea was there. Rennie Harlan was there. Rachel was there. Transportation. Just everybody's there. And this time we're going to figure it out. So now we start putting ideas on the table. And we're doing this again. And I'm not kidding. We're 2 hours into this meeting. We are just failing horribly. And we had Danny. What's the name of the character? Can't think of the name of the Danny Hassel plays it, okay?
Right.
So we've got him in the truck. He's going down the road, and Freddie has to try and stop him. So at some point, after 2 hours in the meeting, we had him up in the air. The truck had turned into a jet airliner.
Right.
Freddie is all of a sudden his co-pilot. It's a scene that
he
never
showed
showed
up
up
in
in
the
the
truck.
film.
He showed up in the truck, though.
So we decided we're going to turn it into a jet. I mean, just after 2 hours, you just, you're tired. You know, you're at the end of the day. You filmed all day anyway, and all of a sudden you're trying to make these decisions. Oh, they got so stupid. You know, is Freddie the stewardess? This was
Which
the
actually would've been
argument.
pretty funny. But
This was well, actually, the argument had come down to this: is we're in the middle of trying to decide if Freddie was going to be the stewardess or the co-pilot, right? I mean, way stupid. And I kind of like did that thing where you get back away from the table and you put your head in your hands and you're just trying to divorce yourself.
like,
And
why am I here?
why am I here? And I did, and I said to myself, I just wish we could hit nothing at all. And I heard myself say it, and I opened my eyes and I looked out, and everybody's looking at me. And I realized that I had used, well, you do know I have a handicap. Because I was born without an inside voice. Everybody looks at me, and the weirdest person, it's like some PA is sitting next to me, and I mean, he was like the least important person at the table. He looks at me and he goes, well, what would that look like? And I was like, yeah, what would that look like? And I go, well, like it would just crash into nothing.
Stop.
And everybody's like tentatively going, well, but what do you mean? I mean, I said, well, imagine this. Imagine if we tied a cable that you couldn't see onto the bumper, tied it to something really heavy, went to the end of the cable, put a camera there, and then ran the truck at 60 miles an hour to the end of the cable. What would it look like? It would look like you were hitting nothing. Of course, what you're actually doing is you're crashing into your own bumper.
Right. Yeah.
So we kind of like thought about it, and we walked away from the meeting going, well, that's what we're going to do. I know that a lot of people have said that it was Rennie Harlan that did it. I know that Rennie Harlan is saying that he came up with that idea. No, but it was mine.
Right. Yeah.
And when I come out with my book, I'm going to have Rachel Talalay tell my side of that story.
That's
So,
awesome.
There you go. I'm
And
getting
the
even.
name you were looking for,
I
the
was-
character
I was
that
looking
Danny Hassel played,
Yeah,
was Dan.
it was Dan. Right.
That
So
was.
that's how that happened, and that's what we did. Is essentially we parked a D7 Caterpillar, and to get motion out of it, we actually kind of had to run a point with a cable and a pulley to pull the truck,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it still remained just like it was in my head at the very beginning. I mean, basically, the truck had a big bumper on it, and we just tied it to a something heavy and ran it to the end of the cable. It looked great.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to have come up with that in that meeting and then see it happen.
There we go.
Okay, there you go.
Fantastic.
Very interesting.
So that's one of the mini stories in Behind the Screams. And if you wanted to get a copy of Behind the Screams, all you have to do is come to Mick Strawn on Messenger with Facebook and beg and we'll exchange money and stuff like that, and I'll send you a book.
Nice. And we'll promote
Perfect.
that as well and share links.
Awesome.
I know you sell it at conventions and stuff like that too. Do you have anything coming up anywhere right now?
Yeah, I have FrankenCon coming up.
Okay.
VetCon, FrankenCon, Scarefest is going to come up around. There's Rockin' Pod. Rockin' Pod is in town here coming up in February, I think. I'm going to be over there and I'll have books and I get to tell different. I get to tell stories from doing rock videos and stuff like that. So
Oh,
Nice.
awesome.
Hit up Mick on his socials, get a copy of the book, catch him at VetCon, FrankenCon. I think some of us may be going to FrankenCon. I know Joe Bob's going to be there, a couple other people. So, but thank everybody for tuning in with us again. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to us now. Go be friends with Mick. Mick, great conversation. It was incredible. Thank you again. And we'll see you guys next week with the Valentine's Day special. So for John, Kellen, TJ, I'm Jay. And until next time,
Keep it spooky.
Later.